If you're new to the Dark Souls PvP scene, you will have heard the word meta being thrown around. In fact, it's not just in Dark Souls, it's pretty much in every single multiplayer game ever. According to the Urban Dictionary, the word meta means abbreviation of most effective tactic available, mostly used when comparing tactics in games, but can be used in other things as well. It can change over time as new tactics are explored, or can change by a change in the rules of a game or availability of new resources. Or a term, especially in art, used to characterize something that is characteristically self-referential. But I think we're referring to the initial one in this instance, so I'll simplify it here. Meta means what's best, in terms of weapons and playstyle. And in this instance in Dark Souls, it's the duty of whoever is in charge of balancing at FromSoft to ensure the meta tier weapons aren't so much better than the lower tiered weapons. Of course, different weapons need to perform, well, differently from each other to diversify the giant catalogue of tools at our disposal. If all weapons acted the same and did the same damage, well, it'd be a bit shit really. So how does a weapon or playstyle achieve meta status? Well, first things first, we have to look at what type of PvP we're doing. Weapons that perform extremely well in invasions might not do so well in a 1v1 duel. And this is where the beauty of theory crafting comes into play. The top or best Dark Souls players will come up with their own build based around certain situations they'll find themselves in. Pioneers of these are players like Peeve, who will create wacky builds but perform exceptionally well with them, most of the time. But what makes a weapon a meta weapon? Well, personally, I don't think it plays into how much damage it does per se. I think it comes down to not only how the weapon performs, for example stamina usage and or whether the weapon includes hyper armor, but you have to look at the weapon's counters to see if it receives the title of a meta weapon. Now I'll throw this out there, every single weapon in Dark Souls 3 has a counter. For example, in this clip, I start with my straight sword, and with that being said, I now have some disadvantages and advantages that come along with this weapon. When I switch to the Ultra Greatsword, those disadvantages and advantages change. But the weapon, as of recording this video, that most people seem to have a problem with is the Carthus Curved Sword. At max rank, this sword will have a 230 AR, this isn't including stat and scaling bonuses, and with a 6-point stamina cost you can spam that R1 all day. So right there you can see why people use this, but I'll add on to that. It's just easy to use. So let's talk about its counter. As I said, every single weapon in Dark Souls 3 has a counter or downsides. Straight and curved swords, easily parryable, no hyper armor, short range unless you take into account phantom range bullshit. Now to truly counter a weapon and playstyle, you'll have to use the tools at your disposal to come up with your own build. I always recommend having a parry tool on hand. The mindset of your opponent changes drastically when they see that in your offhand. On my level 70 character, I've done just that. I have the Astora Straight Sword for roll catching and horizontal swings to stagger multiple enemies, and a rapier in the offhand to switch things up in a combo or to have that parry potential there as well. Keeping your opponent guessing is also a valuable tool in our arsenal. As I mentioned earlier, straight and curved swords are pretty easy to parry, so if I see an opponent who has a parry tool in their offhand, I'll switch to my Ultra Greatsword, which is unparryable unless you do the rolling R1, therefore countering their counter potential. You still with me? So that's being prepared as much as possible for whatever situation I'm faced with, changing up my approach to match them, so instead of raging about meta weapons being broken, perhaps come up with a way on your own to maybe counter them. And if that fails, just wait for PvP Skills to upload a new video about awesome builds and see if that tickles your fancy. But with all that said, fuck Great Shields. Take care everyone, be good to one another, and thanks for watching.